My pleasure to have you joining us for the Chief Learning Officer Symposium. My name is Mike Prokopik. I'm the editor-in-chief for Chief Learning Officer, and it's my pleasure on behalf of everybody at the magazine to welcome you to the virtual symposium. Wherever you are, whether you're at home in your office, a fortunate enough person to be on a beach self-isolating, I hope you're staying safe and staying healthy. I think it's really so critical at times like this to be able to rely on a community. And I know that many of you have a community of friends and neighbors and family that you can rely on. And I hope that you see the symposium community as a community that you can rely on as well. For more than 17 years, the symposium has been a place where you've been able to go to for insight, for advice, and for inspiration. And that's what we're looking for from our opening keynote speaker, who I'll be introducing to you in just a few moments. A couple of housekeeping notes. There's going to be dozens of sessions available to you over the next 3 days. They're going to be available live, like we're doing now, as well as on demand. So encourage you, if you're not able to attend throughout the course of the day, be sure to come back and view those sessions later on as well. Part of what is also so critical about events like this, and that we're unfortunately missing when we don't have a face-to-face event, is that ability to connect with one another in person. So we've put in place a few places throughout the course of the next 3 days where hopefully you can build out your own professional network, where you can meet other folks and engage in dialogue and sort of build up that group of people that you can depend on to lift you up in times when you might need it a little bit, and also rely on when you're looking for advice and insight on what you can be doing. So the first place I want to point you to is the networking lounge. There's a number of places in the virtual environment in that networking lounge where you can engage in chats with one another. I've already been in this morning with a few fellow attendees, not talking about learning and development, but more talking about strategies for managing kids when you're staying at home and trying to keep them entertained and educated at the same time. So it's been fun to already engage with a few people who are attending in those chat rooms as well. So I encourage you to go there in the networking lounge, check out the chat rooms. I also want to point out that we're going to have a couple of birds of a feather sessions. These are 2 special Zoom sessions where you'll be able to engage in the dialogue, where you'll be able to connect live with other attendees of the CLO Symposium. We're going to be doing one tomorrow morning and then one Wednesday afternoon. So I encourage you to check out those sessions. Join us for that. We're going to be creating small breakout sessions where you can engage with other folks and hopefully get that sort of personal face-to-face connection that we're unfortunately going to miss when we're doing a virtual event like this. Just 2 other quick things to make note of. We are also running a leaderboard. If you take a look at the leaderboard in the virtual environment, you'll see that there's a way that you can rack up some points and earn some Amazon gift card certificates. So it includes things like visiting the booths and engaging in Q&As, attending sessions like this. You're earning points on that towards that leaderboard right now by being a part of this session. So keep checking back over the course of 3 days on the leaderboard, and at the end of the symposium, we'll be awarding those Amazon gift card certificates to the folks who are ranked highest on there. And then finally, we also have a short little scavenger hunt that we're going to be doing each day. So there are 5 objects hidden around the entire CLO Symposium virtual environment. Go ahead and find those, and then at the end of each day, we will be selecting a group of people who have found all those objects for additional prizes and gift certificates. So again, we're just trying to make it engaging for you, giving you a chance to connect with one another, with our speakers, and with our sponsors. So please be sure to do that. One final word about the sponsors. I just want to say a word of thanks to them. We were all expecting to be face-to-face this month in Florida, hanging out on the beach with perhaps a drink in our hand and engaging with one another in that way. And our sponsors were as well. So please take a moment, stop by the exhibit hall and visit and chat with those folks who are continuing to support this event right now when the virtual environment. we definitely owe them a debt of gratitude for helping to make this happen. And if you go by their booth in the exhibit hall, you'll find that there's a wealth of content that they're making available for free. All you got to do is just click into those booths. You have your own personal swag bag. You'll be able to download a lot of the materials that they're offering for free to attendees of the virtual symposium. So I encourage you to go into the exhibit hall, say a word of thanks to our sponsors, and find out a little bit about what they do. All right, with that, that's me talking a lot about the virtual environment and what you can experience here. But the main attraction right now is our opening keynote speaker. So let me just take a moment to welcome in Caroline Webb. Caroline is the CEO of 7Shift. She's an economist by training, and was a senior advisor to McKinsey. Is a senior advisor to McKinsey and has been working has worked with McKinsey for quite a while. She is most well known recently for her book, How to Have a Good Day. And to Caroline's credit, about a week and a half ago, she reached out to me and said, you know, maybe we should change the content of our initially planned keynote to talk a little bit more personally to the folks who are going to be attending, and how you can have a good day in times that are particularly challenging like this. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Caroline, who will be walking us through this for the next hour. You're going to have a chance to ask her questions, so I encourage you, if you have questions, drop them in the Q&A app at the end. I'll be pitching those at Caroline so that she can answer your questions directly. So with that, let me go ahead and turn it over to you, Caroline. Welcome.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So first of all, we have the exciting moment where I get to share my screen. Does that look good at your end? Can you see that? Yep. Fantastic. Wonderful. Well, I am really grateful for the chance to be here for a couple of different reasons. I mean, first of all, as Mike said, it is remarkable that we're here. It is really impressive at how the organizing team have pivoted, how you guys have pivoted and have made this such an amazing virtual session. It sounded wonderful, all the things that you're going to have over the next 3 days. But I'm also grateful because I think you're genuinely such an important audience. I've been in the field of leadership development and personal development for 20 years or so. I did have a first career as an economist, but the last 20 years have been focused on how to help people learn and grow in professional environments. And I know as a result just how crucial your role is right now. Everything that you do sets the culture and the tone for how people are going to navigate the next few days, weeks, and months. So I think it's a very privileged position to be in, to be able to speak to you. And I hope that what I talk about today is useful, yes, for you, but also might find its way into some of the advice that you're giving all the people who I'm sure will be coming to you for a lot of help right now. So as Mike said, I did write a book called How to Have a Good Day. And, you know, I thought that was a pretty upbeat title, I have to say. But I actually had a lot of friends say to me, but why did you call it How to Have a Good Day rather than How to Have an Awesome Day? I mean, really, shouldn't you set your sights a little higher and go a little bit further than just good? What about awesome? And my first reply usually is to be a bit glib and to say, well, you know, as you can probably tell, I'm from the UK originally. I have a British accent. And, you know, when you say the word awesome in a British accent, it tends to sound just like kind of sarcastic, you know. Yeah, well, that's really awesome. I guess the Wi-Fi has gone out again. We just don't sound right saying the word awesome, us Brits. But if I got the chance to actually give a proper answer, the real answer that I would give is that I think a lot of awesome is down to luck. I think that, you know, it's not always within reach. But what I do find very interesting is how we handle ourselves within constraints, because even at the best of times, we're all facing constraints. We're all facing ups and downs. You know, our kids might be struggling, or our parents might be sick, or, you know, we might have issues in our relationship. We might have issues with our own health, not COVID-19, but, you know, any number of other things that might be wrong. We might be struggling to sleep. We might be dealing with any number of disappointments and challenges in our personal life. And I've always been very interested in being realistic about that, but then also trying to find places for optimism within that realism. And my place for that has always been behavioral science. So yes, first career as an economist, but I ended up using a lot of behavioral economics, behavioral neuroscience, behavioral psychology in my work as a coach and as a leadership developer, to help to identify really in an evidence-based way, what are the small things truly that will make a big difference if we can tweak them in the way we go about our daily working lives? What will make a big difference to our performance, our productivity, our well-being? So I've always been focused on that sort of thing. And right now, I'm really thinking hard about, let's be realistic about the challenges we're facing, but let's see whether that toolkit could be applied right now, recognizing the challenges we're facing are more extreme than most that we'll ever see in our lifetime again, or that we have seen before. What is there that we know from the behavioral science will make a big difference, a disproportionate difference to the way that we feel from day to day? And you know, there are tons of lists out there already on how to cope with the pandemic. And I think that, I mean, frankly, most of them are fantastic. I think that the idea that you should exercise, spot on. It's a really quick boost to your mood and your sense of focus. The idea that you should bring some mindfulness into your day, absolutely. Even small amounts of mindfulness can make a huge difference. Connection, making time to connect with friends and family, absolutely. So the research is very, very solid on those things. But the thing that I'm also experiencing and seeing is that sometimes it's hard to even do those things. It's just hard right now to do the things that we know we should do. So there are days when we just feel a bit too low or a bit too stressed to do the thing that we know we should be doing in order to live well in time of pandemic. And so I became even more interested in, well, what can you do if you have no energy? What can you do if you have no energy and no time? What are the habits of mind, the mental habits that we can cultivate that take basically no time at all, that will make a difference to our sense of resilience and our ability to be calm and clear as we face into this? And I'm going to talk about 3 of those habits of mind today that I think are good for us. They're good for the people that we work with. And they're also good, frankly, in times when things are not so bad. I think that they are habits for building resilience that are good, useful leadership habits to have. So I'm going to talk about 3 things. I'm going to talk about compassion, I'm going to talk about certainties, and I'm going to talk about conscious attention, because I like alliteration and it helps me remember things. So go with me on that. And you can always use your own language for all these things later on. Compassion, so let's start there. It's not a word that we use a lot in business, actually. Some of you won't be from the for-profit world, you might from the non-profit world, but it's still not a word that we use a lot. I think that leadership models over the last few years have started to talk about emotional intelligence and empathy a little more boldly, but still compassion is something that we don't talk about that much explicitly in the workplace. And I think it has to come more front and center now than it has in the past. Because if you think about the last few days, weeks, I bet that you have seen kind of spiky behavior. I think it would be fair to assume on my part that you've seen some of what I've seen, which is, you know, some choppy emails, people not being as reliable, perhaps, as usual. Perhaps, you know, seeing a bit of ups and downs that you wouldn't normally see in their performance. It's kind of, that's how things kind of are right now. And I'm not saying that this is other people. This is also me, to be honest. And, you know, there are any number of little examples I could give you, but I'll give you one really, it's so stupid. It's such a stupid example, but I'm going to give it to you because, yeah, I want to give you a sense of, you know, just how small the effects can be. So I am normally a very warm emailer. I'm one of those people who's sort of always trying to be very human. Probably one of those people who tends to write over long emails, if I'm honest, as a result of that. But still, you know, that is my style. That is who I am. And that's how I like to be when I'm writing emails. And I was emailing with a colleague who I wanted to have her meet someone else. So I wanted to set up a 3-person conversation. And I'd given her huge chunks of time on my calendar to say, I can do any time up until 3:45 p.m. on this particular day. And, you know, if I'd said 3:45 p.m. to you, you would think, okay, well, there's a specific reason that there's something that is happening perhaps at 4 o'clock that means that she couldn't do 4 o'clock or beyond that. But this woman came back to me and she was sort of a bit, I don't know, a bit jumpy. And she was like, well, there are other people that I want to now involve in the call. And so can you do 4 o'clock? And I had a reaction, I'll be honest. I felt, isn't it bloody obvious that I can't do that? I'm allowed to say that because I have a British accent. But isn't it obvious that I can't do 4 o'clock? And so I felt a little, and then I started typing in a response, and I explained that actually the reason I couldn't do 4 o'clock was a really personal, important reason, which was this family birthday. So my husband's grandfather, who is as old as you might imagine he is, was having a birthday, and we had figured out a way to do a family Zoom. And we were all going to join, and he'd never used Zoom before, and this was going to be a big surprise, and we all needed to be ready before 4 o'clock so that we could say happy birthday and surprise him. So it was quite important to me that we were there. So I wrote back and I said all of that, and she came back and said almost nothing. She was so brisk. She didn't say anything about the family birthday. She didn't say anything nice about it. She just said, well, can you do this other time? Which was just a random time. And it wasn't great for me, but I just thought, oh, sod it. And then I wrote back, and I have never done this before, but I wrote a one-word email. I said, yes, period, send. Now, I know that you're probably saying, well, okay, you didn't say no. I mean, you know, it's not that bad in the scale of things, but it's not me. It's not how I normally am, especially with that little pissy period afterwards. You know, that's a kind of passive aggressive move when you see that. So I thought, okay, so what is going on here for me? I thought, I know what's going on here for me. It's just the same as what's going on for a lot of people. And it's because of the way that our brain responds to threats and rewards. And it's something about a deep process that our brains maintain in order to keep us safe and secure. And it's that we always, at any given time, have our brains scanning the environment around us for possible rewards to seek out and discover and make us feel motivated and keep us moving forward. And then threats that it needs to defend us against. And the thing is that the sorts of rewards we're talking about are not, you know, food, money, and fame, although those are very nice in small doses. We're talking about quite existential types of rewards that our brain responds to, that you see the brain's reward system light up to. We're talking about self-worth, so things that make us feel competent, things that make us feel we've got space to act, and authority, autonomy, things that make us feel like we've got a purpose to what we're doing, that it's not pointless. Things that make us feel in the social realm that we're being treated fairly, that we're connected and we feel belonging and we're included in what's going on. We feel respected. And these things have always been important to us as human beings because we're a social species. And actually having these things makes us safe, makes us part of the tribe. And so, you know, these are the sorts of things that make us feel good, that give us a boost when we experience them. But if any of them get undermined, then that also gets coded by the brain quite instinctively, and it gets coded as a threat. Because if we lose any of those things, then who knows what might happen to our sense of safety and security. And so we are highly responsive to things that feel like, you know, we're out of our depth, that we are having our toes being trodden on, that we're doing what we're doing is pointless, that maybe we're not being properly respected, maybe our boundaries are not being respected, maybe our calendars are not being respected, and so on. And so, yes, I was feeling a little threatened. And you might say, well, that's a bit ridiculous because it's such a tiny thing, but it's a very instinctive thing that happens below the level of our consciousness. And what happens when our brain focuses more on the threats than the rewards in a situation is that it triggers a defensive response. And the defensive response happens whether it's a sensible thing to do or not a sensible thing to do, because it errs on the side of caution. If this looks like it might be a thing that threatens you, then it'll err on the side of caution and launch a defensive response. And you know what that means. I think you probably know the phrase fight or flight. Actually, it turns out there's another defensive response, which is to freeze. And we're talking in the workplace not about punching someone, although, you know, I'm sure that there are moments when it has almost felt like it might come to that. No, we're not talking about fight, flight, or freeze. Literally, we're talking about things like snappy comments, knee-jerk reactions, unresponsiveness, you know, perhaps someone ignoring your email for ages. We're talking about the kind of spikiness that was going on in that email exchange with this perfectly nice woman where we were just getting a little with each other. And the thing that we want to know about this is not just that a lot of the bad behavior that we see in the workplace is going to be a brain on the defensive and launching these little fight, flight, freeze responses. I mean, that's already useful to know. But the other thing we want to know is that when you are on the defensive, something very profound is happening in the reallocation of resources in the way that your brain is working, because you've got a limited amount of mental energy. Your brain needs blood and glucose to run, just like any other part of your body, and it's quite hungry for those things. And so when you are powering up a fight, flight, freeze response, which requires quite a bit of mental energy, it has to power down something. And so what you see in someone who is experiencing negative stress is that there is less activity in the part of the brain that we call the prefrontal cortex in order to power up the response in other parts of the brain. And what we're talking about here is not big things. This study that I'm quoting here, even quite mild, acute, uncontrollable stress, etc., is from a study where they put people in a brain scanner and showed them mildly upsetting images. And even that sense of perhaps not being in control was enough to reduce activity in the people who were being scanned. You could see that there was less activity in the more sophisticated part of their brain. And what do I mean by the prefrontal cortex? What does Amy Arnston mean by prefrontal cognitive abilities? She means reasoning, self-control, forward thinking. So not just being clever, but also being nice, being, holding back from blurting out the thing that is a bit rude, thinking about, okay, well, let me take a zoom out and think about the bigger picture here and what really matters. So those activities, those abilities drop when we're going on the defensive. And so that's useful to know, right? Because it means that just as you're facing a challenge that might be a little difficult, just as you're trying to rise to that challenge to handle it gracefully and intelligently, actually, your brain is diverting resources away from the part of the brain that would allow you to do that really well. In other words, you're becoming dumber and less pleasant just at the point where you might need that graceful intelligence to play its biggest part. And when you think back to those things that I was saying earlier on about the things that the brain finds rewarding, take them away, brain finds them threatening. If you think about competence, we're all struggling right now because none of us have done this pandemic thing before. I don't know about you, maybe you're juggling at home and you're trying to figure out how to work in a suboptimal workspace. Like, we've never done this virtual conference before. We were fiddling around before just at the last minute trying to figure out Zoom links. I'm new to this whole webinar thing and sort of, emoting to camera, which I hope I'm doing okay. But the thing is that we're all out of our competence zone. We're all doing things that are new and that feel challenging and make us feel a little uncomfortable. Autonomy, we're all constrained in our autonomy. By definition, in the stay-at-home orders that we're experiencing, the restrictions on how we behave and how we live is for a higher purpose, but it's still a restriction in our autonomy. And so if those things are being undermined kind of every day right now, no wonder we're a little antsy, because we're going to be more reactive to other things that we would normally take in stride, that we would be more resilient to, but we have less resilience because we're just always slightly on alert at the moment. So that's why I think compassion is so very important, because if you want to think about how we should then respond to bad behavior, it's probably not to get into a series of escalating emails. It is to take a breath and say, okay, what's going on here? And to say, these are the three things that I do. I think, how can I be generous about this? What is a generous perspective here? A generous perspective is that this person with the annoying calendaring habits is probably not evil. I mean, statistically, only 1% of the population is a psychopath. It's actually just statistically unlikely that they're a horrible person. It's probably more likely that circumstances are putting someone on the defensive and meaning that they're not behaving brilliantly. Okay, so assume good intent, be generous, be curious, like what is there that could be driving this? I've got a little rubric, which is my cap and fur: competence, autonomy, purpose, fairness, inclusion, respect. You've seen it on a couple of slides. I keep that in top of mind to say, okay, well, what could be challenging her right now? What could be creating this kind of spiky behavior? Why should she be kind of, you know, throwing all the cards up in the air and trying to make this scheduling thing so much harder? And the moment I thought about it, I thought, oh, she wants this to be as effective as possible. She thinks these people really will add to the power of this project. Of course, she really wants it to be a success, and she's trying to control that. Okay, all right. So then it sort of reframes itself as, I suppose this is excitement and a desire to really make this work, which again, sort of might be obvious actually, but in my heightened, hopped up, annoyed state of mind, it was not until I asked myself, okay, if I'm generous, if I'm curious, what could be going on here? And then if you can say something appreciative, well, the magic of that is that it boosts your sense of self-worth. It boosts your sense of social standing to hear something nice about yourself. It doesn't have to be hokey, and it certainly shouldn't be made up. But if someone is going to share some appreciation with you, it's going to help you come off the defensive and behave better. And so I thought, okay, well, the next email I will say how grateful I genuinely am for her energy and her desire to widen the circle and bring new talents into the tent. And as I did that, I felt it. I actually felt appreciative. I felt grateful. And I'm sure it was helpful for her too, but it also helped me. And what I would say about this sort of very active, practical compassion of being generous, curious, appreciative, is that you can also turn it on yourself, because you may be beating yourself up right now that you're not completely at your best because of this defensive mode that your brain is likely in quite a bit of the time. Well, maybe you could be generous, curious, and appreciative with yourself. Maybe you could say to yourself, okay, I'm doing my best right now. I wonder what's going on. I wonder what might have wound me up here. Okay, well, here's what I think I'm doing well. If you can do a little bit more of that for yourself, you can help yourself manage your own defensiveness. And that's going to be a helpful thing as you want to think clearly about what's happening around you. So that's the first topic. That's a very practical take on what compassion can be and needs to be in these times. Certainties. So let me talk about the second big thing here. Certainties. I'm interested in this because there is so much uncertainty that we're facing into right now, and it feels tough. But it's interesting because if you think about our normal life, if you can remember that, we actually quite like surprises from time to time. We like getting a present that we weren't expecting. We like perhaps encountering a twist or a turn in a plot of a movie or a book. And actually, interestingly, this is something that seems to be wired into us at quite a young age. So one of the surest ways that's been found in research by child psychologists to make a child laugh is to play peekaboo with them. And that actually cuts across cultures really immensely dramatically in a way that you would sort of think, well, surely there must be somewhere in the world where this just doesn't translate. They haven't been found yet. So the idea of unexpectedly revealing your face, apparently, in a place or in a time or in a way that is unexpected, one of the surest ways of making a little one laugh. So we are able to take a pleasant thing, add uncertainty to it, and enjoy it even more. It makes it more fun. But the intensifying effect works the same way with negative things too. It turns out that our response, the scale of our response to something negative, is also intensified if we add uncertainty to the mix. There's a picture of hot panels on the screen right now because of a study that was done in my hometown in London by some researchers. And they had a bunch of people touch these hot panels, and they were hot enough to be painful. And they had them touch various different panels. And what the researchers were playing with was, how does it affect people's pain, the experience that they have of the pain, if they know what they're going to experience versus if they don't know what they're going to experience? And what they found was that when they gave people less idea of what on earth they were going to expect, they felt the pain more intensely when they touched the hot panel. When they had more idea of what the pain was going to be like, then they were better able to cope with it. And that's what we see in research on a number of different topics in different contexts. It turns out that we can cope better with negative uncertainty if we can bound it, if we can find some things that we do know that allows us to kind of get our arms around the bits that we don't know. And I mean, here's a obvious everyday example, or at least it is when we're not in lockdown and in quarantine, thinking about travel. If you think about when a train or a plane is late, how annoying it is when you have no idea when it's going to arrive, versus at least you're given an ETA, which is going to be 30 minutes late, which is still very annoying, but it's easier to cope with than if you knew nothing about when it was going to turn up. And that's what we see in the way that people can develop more psychological resilience to uncertainty, is to home in on what is known, what is certain in the situation, even if a lot of it is not. And this has been used in PTSD counseling, as some of you may know, for many years, but it's just as applicable to us in the workplace when we're thinking about managing ourselves through crisis. It's really helpful to say, okay, leaving aside all the things I don't know, how can I amplify the things that are certain in my environment? And let's start with the most obvious. So what is there that you know for sure? What are the facts? What can you say about the situation that you're in? I mean, yes, we don't know when this is going to end, honestly, but we know that we're in lockdown right now. This is the term that gets used in London, lockdown. Maybe stay at home, it may be shelter in place, whatever the language is, wherever you are. Okay, so this is where we are. I'm lucky enough to have a roof over my head. I have enough food for the next day or so, at least. I am also able to say, I know how I feel. I feel okay. I feel uptight. I feel whatever I feel. And that's as powerful in a way as naming the facts, because it's been shown that even just labeling our feelings has been a way of acknowledging the situation enough to bring some certainty to an uncertain situation and reduce the state of alert in our brains. So what do I know for sure? The facts, the feelings. Second thing, what do you know about yourself? Who are you? That doesn't change, right? That is who you are. What are the strengths that you have and that you can draw on? What are the talents that you have? What are the values that are dear to you? When you think about situations where you've struggled in the past, what is there that has helped you through that? What is there that you can draw on now? And, you know, it might be that it's professional stuff. It might be non-professional stuff. It might be that you have a sense of humor and you know that you're good at laughing and finding the levity in a situation. Okay, well, maybe you're the person then that can bring that levity into the team and find the funny meme or find the funny cartoon. Maybe you are one of those people who's just really good at finding the right song to set the right mood or tone. Okay, so, you know, maybe you think about making yourself a playlist. Maybe you think about sharing that. Maybe you allow yourself a dance break once a day. It doesn't have to be serious, but it's serious in the sense that this is all part of you and your makeup, and whatever you're good at, you're still good at now. And again, just as with the tapping into and acknowledging your feelings, studies have shown that the sheer fact of taking a moment before a big meeting, just to take a moment to make a note of the things that matter to you most, even if it's got nothing to do with the meeting, people have found that when you then go into the meeting, they will rate you as higher performing and more leader-like, more competent, more confident. Just that sheer moment of just taking a moment beforehand to say, who am I? What matters to me? Makes a big difference to how we then show up with each other. Why? Because I think it amplifies our sense of certainty and grounds us and gives us a solid foundation to stand on. And lastly, what can I control in this situation? Yes, I know there's a ton that we don't control, but there's a lot that actually we can shape and choose in this situation, more than sometimes we think about. I mean, certainly we can think about choosing our attitude. I hear that a lot in thinking about resilience, of course, but it's true. I mean, you can choose the attitude that you're going to have about this. You can project forward in a year and say, well, what do I want to be able to say about how I handled this? You can decide what you want to learn from this. And I don't mean necessarily that you're going to suddenly kind of learn French, because I think a lot of us are feeling more stretched than we were before, not less. Some of us have more time, some of us don't. And even if you do have more time, you might be feeling kind of low energy. But what can you learn from the situation? What might you learn? I mean, what might we learn from this experience of doing this webinar together? What might that equip us and enable us to do in our lives as learning professionals going forward? And what boundaries might I be able to set? Perhaps not many, but you may be able to say, actually, there are a few things that are important to me. I do want to take my dance break at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Or for me, I've become, and I never really cooked a lot before, but now my cutoff point at the end of the day is, right, I'm going to stop at this particular time and I'm going to cook. I am going to cook come what may, even if it's not very effective cooking. That is a boundary that I've set at the end of the day. And that gives me a small sense of control. And it can be quite an effective thing as a professional, as a leader, to help others with these questions as well. There's a guy that I know, I've known him for many years, and he's a really thoughtful CEO. He runs a clothing company, and many of you may know that clothing companies have very, very narrow margins. So they're fighting a lot of ups and downs in the market a lot of the time, even at times that are not like these. And he was dealing with a situation where there had been a fraud of all things in the company restaurant. They have offices around the world, but this was at headquarters. And it was really upsetting because it meant that some people were kind of dodgy and they were exited. But after that, the crisis didn't end because there'd been this fraud going on for several years. And then what happened was that a bunch of people then turned on the finance department and said, well, you should have spotted this. How did you not know that this was going on? This is terrible. And then, of course, the uncertainty creeping in of, if we didn't know about that, what on earth else don't we know about? So there was that real deep sense of unease. And so this CEO, George, thought, okay, well, I understand what's going on here with uncertainty and certainty. So he got the team together and he said, okay, what do we know for sure here? What are the facts? And they worked through that together. And there was quite a bit of interpretation and generalization that he had to help them strip out to get to the unemotional version of what was going on and just say, okay, what do we know for sure? And he did allow them to label and say, well, I feel very frustrated. And what do we know for sure? Okay, what strengths can we draw on? And in the collective context, what he said was, when have we handled difficult times before? Because actually there were quite a few times that they'd gone through where they'd pulled together as a team and they'd figured things out. And then he said, okay, well, what is ours to control at this point? And they put together this new risk management system, which I know doesn't sound like the sexiest thing, but my goodness, it gave them back a sense of control. It gave them a feeling of control in building it, but it also gave them back a broader sense of control that lasted beyond the immediate crisis. So this is a really powerful set of questions that a leader can learn to use that will serve well, not just in pandemic times, but in any crisis. Okay, I want to say something about conscious attention. Conscious attention. I mean, that's the currency of our lives, right? That is what we have every day, is our conscious attention and where we put it. It's really something we don't tend to think about, though, because we just carry it with us. It's like breathing. Conscious attention, though, is something that we need to be even more conscious of in times like this. And I'm going to get you to demonstrate this actually by asking you to do a little exercise. Wherever you're sitting right now, I am going to suggest that you grab a pen if you've got one nearby. If you don't, please don't worry. You can do this in your head. I'm going to ask you to take 7 seconds to wait for it, to look around the room and count all the things that you can see that are blue. You ready? Go. Okay. Now I'd like you to look back at me, and I can't obviously make sure you have. I might have lost a ton of you by just getting you to look around the room. But bring your attention back to the screen. Now I'd like to do 2 things. I'd like you to write down the number of blue things that you saw. You can write it on your hand if you don't have a piece of paper. Then I'd like you to write a second number, which is your confidence on a scale of 0 to 100% that you're right on that. So 0 to 100. So 100 is, I am so sure I could not be wrong. And 0 is, I have no idea what my name is right now. Okay, so you've got those 2 numbers written down. Great. Now, I have to trust you here. I'm going to ask you to stay focused on me and stay focused on the screen. I'm going to ask you to write down the number of things that you have around you that are red. And I'm going to ask you to do the same thing, rate next to it the level of confidence. I'm asking you not to turn your head and not to count. Okay, so you should have 4 numbers written down. Now I'm going to ask you, which number are you more confident on? Was it the blue one or was it the red one? Now, if we were in person, I know that right now there'd be a kind of groan going out across the room, because you would find the question kind of annoying, because of course you're more confident with the blue number because that's what I asked you to do. That's what I asked you to count. I asked you to count blue, and then I asked you to somehow just tell me red without asking you to do that up front. So that's obviously the case. You're more confident in giving an answer when you've been asked to perform that task. When I've asked you to look for blue, you're more confident in answering the number of things that you have seen that are blue. And that's a sort of trivial thing in a sense. You see what you're looking for, but it masks a much deeper truth that is really important for us to understand as leaders, and especially in times of challenging crisis. So here's what's going on. The conscious part of your brain can only process a certain amount of information, however intelligent it is. It's thought that you can maybe process 50 bits of information at any given time. And wherever you are right now, whatever gorgeous or horrible space you're in, there are trillions of pieces of information around you right now. You could be in the barest kind of most closet-like space, but even then there's the sort of the texture of the wall. There is the way that the light is falling on every inch of the wall. There's each corner, every piece of furniture, the thing that you're sitting on, the sensation in your body. Like there is an information point in your world right now, which is, how does your big toe on your right foot feel? That is a piece of information. And if your brain tried to consciously focus on all of those things, it would crash like an overloaded computer, because it doesn't have the capacity. So luckily, we've got a nice solution to this. It turns out that our brain filters out most of what's around us that seems irrelevant, so that we can focus our small amount of conscious attention on the things that matter most. What that means in practice is that it's like we're looking down a pair of binoculars at the world, and we're seeing what's in focus, but we're not seeing, feeling, hearing the other stuff around it. Which is fine, of course, if you are making good choices about what's relevant and what's irrelevant. But the thing is that your brain doesn't use a particularly complicated way of thinking about what that message should be, what that filtering mechanism should be. It uses various biases and heuristics that are all fitting under one thing, which is the fact that your brain directs conscious attention to anything that matches what's already top of mind for you. So, of course, if I tell you to look for blue things, you're going to be able to count the number of blue things. If I don't tell you to look for red things, that's not fair, because I'm not giving you that goal. So you can look at the same field of vision, but not see the red things. And this, of course, is more than just seeing colors. We can miss quite big things because we haven't decided to look for them. Many of you will recognize this lovely, famous video, which was put together by Dan Simons and Chris Chabris. And it was probably the first famous study in the field of selective attention, the stuff that we're talking about right now. And the way it works, for those of you who haven't seen it for a few years, is that there are players, they're students who are in white passing the ball to each other, and there are students in black who are passing the ball to each other. And what the researchers wanted to do was make a video that they could show to people afterwards and say, please tell me how many passes the players in white managed to achieve. And they gave that task at the beginning of the video. They had people watch the video, then they asked afterwards, so how many passes did the people in white t-shirts manage to make? But in the middle of the video, a woman in a gorilla suit, it was a woman, not that you would know because it's a full-length furry gorilla suit, came on as the middle of the field of vision, paused for quite a long time, beat her chest, looking directly at the camera, and then walked off in a kind of nonchalant, not particularly quick way. And then at the end, when they've asked people who've watched the video, how many passes did you see between players with white t-shirts? They then say, did anybody see anything weird? And time and again, what happens is that half the people don't see the gorilla, didn't see it at all. I didn't see the gorilla when I first saw the film. And I don't know whether you can remember. I'm sure that most of you will have seen this. Why didn't we see the gorilla? Because we weren't looking for it. You know, we were very focused on our task. So this has been repeated in so many different ways since then, often using a gorilla as an homage to the original study. There's a more serious study that I often cite, which is that 83% of radiologists missed a picture of a gorilla printed in a lung scan because they weren't looking for it. So we can miss quite serious, important, professionally related things if we're not looking for them. And that is interesting and powerful to know, but this top of mind effect, the way that what you go in looking for, what is top of mind as you go into a conversation or a situation or a day affects what you then perceive, what seems to be your reality, is very subtle. It doesn't have to be that you've said, okay, I'm going to look for a gorilla, or I'm going to look for a problem in these numbers, or I'm going to look for an issue with this particular performance review. It can be something much more subtle than that. Your mood can shape what you perceive to be true and right and objective in your reality. So there was another study that was done with a group of people who signed up, and they were all given a test. And then half of the people were put in a slightly bad mood by being told randomly that they had failed the test. Not a big deal, but just enough to sort of tick you off a little bit. If you have been trying hard at the test and the test wasn't hard and you're suddenly told you failed, it would just, yeah, take the edge off your mood. And then the researchers gave everybody the same neutral description of an individual to read. And they read the description, and then they were asked by the researchers, how likable do you find this person? And the people who were given perfectly normal test results said this person was perfectly likable. The people who were in a slightly bad mood, because they were in a bad mood, thought that this person was less likable. That's how pernicious, how subtle, how pervasive the top of mind effect can be. And so you can see why this might matter, especially at this moment, because we're being surrounded by so much bad news. We are experiencing difficult, negative things that many haven't seen since the time of war. It's really a challenging environment to be in. To look for the good things is perhaps not that easy. But when we are in this situation, we're exposed to so many negative things all the time. Think about what we've just learned. If you've got negative things that are top of mind, what is your brain going to make sure you're going to see more of? More negative things. And what is the gorilla that you might miss? Well, perhaps the more positive signals. It's not to say that things aren't tough, but you're not seeing the whole picture. You cannot see the whole picture because your brain is filtering out, has to filter out some stuff. And if you're not careful, the things that you'll be filtering out are the things that actually will give you a boost, that would give you a sense of resilience. You know, this is what our grandmothers used to call getting out of bed on the wrong side. It was to sort of start something going wrong in the morning and then to see everything negative that happens afterwards and to miss the good stuff. But just as with some of the other stuff that I've been talking about, some of the other research that I have been sharing with you, it hints at the way to turn this around, because all of this is true in reverse as well. So if you decide to look for some of the good things, then you're more likely to see them. That can be your blue. And you're more likely to not miss them. And then you're more likely to see other good things after that. And this can be as simple, it doesn't have to be a hokey thing. It can just be saying, okay, I am going to take a moment to think about 3 good things. I force myself to think about 3 good things. I even have a little timer, which has a 2 on it. 2 minutes, I'm going to think about 3 good things. And initially it might be a bit hard because I might be in a bit of a low, but then I notice the leaves on the tree out there, which are sort of rustling in a really nice way in the sunshine. And I think about a piece of toast that I'm eating, which, is what lunch is these days. It's really just quite nice. And I think about a colleague's dog that was goofing around on a Zoom earlier on, and I perhaps allow myself to smile at that. And the sheer fact of having those things top of mind mean that I'm more likely to notice what's good in the next 5 minutes and the next 5 minutes after that. And that's something, of course, we can do with our colleagues as well. There's a person that I have worked with a lot in the past. Her name is Roz. She works in healthcare. You can imagine all the ups and downs that her team goes through. And she noticed that with more negative things happening, she was noticing that they were becoming less good at problem solving. They were being less effective at thinking through the challenges that were on their plate, because it was becoming harder for them to see solutions. And so she instituted a tiny little tweak at the beginning of team meetings. She said, okay, non-hokey. She said simply this, let's review the things that have worked out well in the last week. And I want to understand why they worked out and what we can learn from that. Small thing, small process shift. So they did that. And then what she noticed was that as their perceptual filters had been reset, they were then much better able to see solutions and opportunities and possibilities as they were then turning their attention to the things that were really difficult on their plate. So this is something that can become not just a personal practice, but also a team process. And one last thing I'll say about this, this sort of 3 good things exercise is that there's something magical. Well, not magical because I focus on science. There's something scientifically backed about the fact that there's something powerful about doing this at any time of the day, but perhaps especially at the end of the day. And I'll tell you why that is. It's something that behavioral economists call the peak end rule. And the way it works is this. It's not just that our perceptions are imperfect and only partial, that we only perceive a part of what's around us at any given time. It's also that when we think back and we remember the quality of an experience, our brain also takes shortcuts. We don't actually assess the quality of every single minute in the day or every single aspect of an experience. Actually, when you look at how people remember a situation, remember an experience, what they remember is mostly the most intense moment, which is what the researchers call a peak. It actually could be a bad thing, or it could be a big thing, but it's the most intense moment, and it's the end. And so you can't always manufacture an intensely amazing moment in a day, but you can pay a little attention to how it ends by doing the 3 good things exercise at the end of the day, whether or not you did it during the day, to sit and say, okay, what was good about today? And you may remember things that you had forgotten. And by bringing them into focus, by bringing that peak, that lift at the end of the day, you're more likely to remember the day in a positive way. And ultimately, the way that we remember our days becomes the way that we feel about our lives. And that's a very important thing, especially right now. So just to recap, what I've talked about is compassion, certainties, and conscious attention. If we can be more compassionate to others and to ourselves, being generous, curious, and appreciative, if we can amplify our certainties, even though there's lots that we don't know, what do we know for sure? What are we? Who are we? What is there that we can control? And being more deliberate about where we put our conscious attention, knowing that it has enormous knock-on effects in what we go on to see and experience in the rest of the day. So what is good right now? And at the end of the day, to look back and say, okay, so what was good today, however small? And if we can do these things more often, then we will have more good moments and we will have more good days. Thank you very much. So that's
Great.
the end of me speaking.
Great. Well, thank you, Caroline, for getting us off to a great start. Lots of people in the chat have been talking throughout this, adding their own experiences and perspectives on a lot of this. So it's really great to see people engaging with you in that. I was just amazed to see where folks are coming from. We've got people from Singapore, Abu Dhabi, the Netherlands, all over the world who are tuning in today. So
that's
thanks for sharing your perspective. Just a quick reminder, everybody, if you have questions, we've got a little bit of time here, so pitch those through the Q&A. There's a couple that have already come through. Caroline, how about this one? And I think you may have just answered this, but if there's anything you want to add, the question is, do you feel it's better to do a positive thinking exercise first thing or before going to sleep, or does it really matter?
Well, you know, it's useful whenever, right? It's a good quick reset. It's funny, usually when I talk about selective attention, I'm talking about confirmation bias, going into meetings, having a certain frame of mind, expecting to see something good or bad, and then seeing exactly what you expect, and needing to kind of widen your focus to make sure that you're taking care of your blind spots. And I usually say it as a kind of aside at the end of talking about that, that actually it's quite a good mood reset as well, whenever you want it. You know, if you're feeling a bit grumpy, just to kind of, as you're walking from one meeting to next, to say, okay, let me force myself to think of 3 good things that I'm grateful for right now. So I think it can be used at any time. But as I say, yeah, I think there's something, I'm not very good at getting a routine in my day, but this is one thing that I would say I have done for years, day in, day out. And I do it actually, you know, it's something that I sit on the couch with my husband. We say, okay, what was good? And sometimes we start slow because it wasn't a great day. And then you remember the good things, and then you start to feel different about the day. And it does add up, and it does build into a different sense about how your life is going. So I would say do it anytime, but try at the end of the day, if not any other time.
If you think about it from a work point of view, so you're trying to work with a team and you're trying to make sure you're maintaining that positive outlook and focusing on the positive there, does that change how you would approach it in any way?
With the team? Well, I mean, you don't want to, so sometimes people say, yeah, but you don't want to become too positive. You don't want to stop seeing the negative. I think that's, in general, we are coded to pay more attention to things that are threats, because existentially that has been important for us to stay alive as a species. You know, we've tended to be more reactive to a fire, a raging fire, and needing to run from a burning building than, you know, the need to run towards a lovely couch in front of a gorgeous, you know, burning log fire. So we're very, very attuned to negativity. We're very attuned to threats in the environment. So for most people, this is just a little bit of a correction to bring the pendulum back into the middle. So I'm definitely not suggesting, I mean, this woman I was talking about, Roz, very no nonsense, very matter of fact. She definitely needed people to be very focused on the things that were going wrong. But she knew that the way that this conscious attention effect would work would be that she needed to get people out of a negative defensive state of mind so that they could do their best thinking. So it was a very good reset for her and her team.
All right, Allison's got a question, and she's kind of bringing it down to the L&D perspective. And she's asking, what creative ways have you seen learning professionals apply this knowledge within their organizations and teams? You know, if you're seeing some of that now or even before this, how do you see a lot of this work being applied through learning and development, that particular prism?
Well, I know there's someone who's speaking later and who's online right now, Pame, who is thinking really thoughtfully about how do I create a program of events that is going to, you know, be engaging and inspiring while, you know, allowing people to continue learning and growing. I think that's just a beautiful example of saying, okay, there's a lot that I can't control here, but what can I? What is at my disposal here that is something that I can take control of and that I can do even within these constraints? And I think, I mean, frankly, I think honestly what you're doing with this conference, not to kind of pat you on the head too much, but I think, you know, honestly.
There it is right there.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, what you've done here is just to pivot the whole thing in this way. I think it's a really good example of saying, okay, yes, it is going to be different, but maybe we can make the most of that. Maybe there's something here that we can control within that is still going to make things worthwhile. So.
Thank you. And Pame, by the way, is still in there in the chat. She just said, hi, Caroline. So Pame, we're looking forward to hearing from you a little bit later on today.
Yeah.
Barbara asks a question, and I appreciate this question because we did change the focus of your presentation, but maybe you can spend just a minute or two and make the connection to what we were initially going to talk about when we, many months ago, when we started talking about the symposium. And that was why every manager needs to become a bit like an amateur behavioral science.
Yeah, sure. Very
connection.
Yeah, it's like 2 for 1. I get the chance to say something about
we got another hour or so, right?
Yeah. But future of work, you're right up against it. Everyone in the professional world is increasingly, you know, it was something we were talking about for such a long time. Now it's very real. Large parts of our tasks across the economy are starting to become more obviously automatable. Everything that can be predicted or can be automated, is repetitive, is going to be automated. And, you know, I still, as you said, Mike, I've still got close ties with my old buddies at McKinsey. I worked there for 12 years and I'm still in touch with them. So I do look at the numbers that they generate on how much of the workforce could be automated in terms of the tasks that they do right now. And yeah, it's you know, this is not theoretical anymore. And so I have become very interested in saying, well, okay, how do we, if we know that all that stuff is going to be automated, how can we be most extremely good at the things that humans are known to be unusually good at? So what are we talking about here? We're talking about things like empathy. We're talking about creativity. We're talking about wisdom, where, you know, the answer isn't perhaps black and white, that you have to zoom out in order to see what the right way to think about a problem is. We're talking about inspiration, the ability to inspire other people. Those are still things right now that are hard for computers, for robots to do, for AI to generate. I mean, if you've ever seen an AI piece of like poetry, it's still pretty funny. So we have those human strengths. But if you think about the average manager, they're still mostly not learning basic behavioral science. And you don't have to learn a lot, but just a little bit to understand how to use the software in people's minds to its best effect. How do you create environments that are rich in empathy and creativity and wisdom and inspiration? Well, actually, research is quite clear on those things, but whether managers will do them or not is a bit hit and miss at the moment. It's a question of like, did they learn that technique or this technique? But there's a core curriculum almost of basic behavioral science that I think every future manager really needs to get on top of, so that the humans still have the ability to be the best humans they can be alongside the robots.
Yeah, there's an opportunity perhaps during this time as a reset for a lot of folks who are in learning and development to focus on that, because it is going to be different coming out of this. You know, of course, there's a lot of sort of rhetoric that may be overblown out of it, but there is a distinction. Usually there's a kernel in there that is significant.
Yeah, and the tasks that are hardest to automate are those that play to those human strengths. That's what's been found, you know, across many different studies. So, you know, we better be as good at them as we can be, because that's our territory going forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, we got one last question here, and it comes from Lisa. This is a kind of very specific question. She's asking the difference between heuristics and biases. You know, we hear a lot about, just to add on to that, we hear a lot about biases, particularly unconscious bias in a lot of our work, but can you maybe pull out a distinction there for us to understand better?
So your conscious brain is very powerful, but it gets tired very quickly. It's sometimes known as system 2. It's sometimes known as the deliberate system. That I tend to use the term the deliberate system. Everything it does is effortful. It uses a lot of energy and gets tired very quickly. It can only do one thing at a time. As I've said earlier on, it can only take in a certain amount of information. So the magic of how amazing we are at our best is that we have this other system, system 1, or the automatic system, which automates most of what we do from day to day and makes it possible to direct that tiny amount of conscious attention and energy to what really matters most. But how it does that is through doing a few things like taking shortcuts. And heuristics is basically just the scientific word for shortcut. It's a rule of thumb. It's a rule of thumb. So a rule of thumb like, oh, well, Caroline seems to have blue top of mind, so I'll make sure that I see blue. Or Caroline seems to be expecting this meeting to be absolutely terrible, so I will make sure that she sees everything that confirms that she's right in expecting that. So the first heuristic is inattentional blindness. The second is confirmation bias. And then they all have these names. So the heuristic is the activity of the shortcut, and the bias is just the snappy name that people have given to it over time. Basically, it's all the same thing. But I hope that gives you a bit more context as to the language that I was using.
Great. Well, on behalf of everybody at Chief Learning Officer and everybody in the audience, Caroline, thank you so much for kicking us off, helping us to start to have a good day today, and hopefully for many days going forward. So thank you for everything you've done to get us started.
Thank
you. And
we're
looking forward to the next couple of days with you all. So thanks again, Caroline, and we'll stay in touch. Take care.
Thank you so much, everybody.